The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. Well, that's a fantastic quote, and it's been adapted from To a Mouse by Robert Burns, although I recall it from the book Of Mice and Men. That's sort of where I got my introduction to that quote. And, well, what does it mean, and what the heck does it have to do with D&D? So let's get into that, right? What it really means is, like, no matter how well you plan something, a lot of times your planning is maybe gonna get messed up once it's put into action. There's another quote that they say, how does it go? The best laid, no plan survives contact with the enemy, right? There's that quote that you've probably heard. And basically what I'm getting at is two things. I actually got some fantastic feedback from Dane, one of the players in the game I'm running on Tuesday nights. Of course, we sort of jokingly refer to it as "we out here" because that sort of became one of our catchphrases. And if you haven't looked at my video about catchphrases, I'll put the link up there. You can go check that out as well. And so in that, I said yesterday in the vlog that I felt, this was just my feelings, I felt like we had sort of a slower game. The pacing was slower, and I felt like it was sort of a good break. But what I didn't realize, and I got some great feedback that brought it to my attention, was that from the other side of the screen, the players, or at the very least Oscar, the player being, of course, Dane, Oscar was like on, feeling the burn and feeling this like tension. At least Dane said he was on the edge of his seat, which is awesome. And that means that even though the pacing was slower, there was still quite a bit of tension because of what was going on, which made me realize, like, oh wow, isn't that interesting? I suppose that on some level you can slow things down or speed them up, and both become devices for manipulating and adjusting the tension in a game. So that's awesome. So hooray for happy accidents. And I'm glad to hear that A, you're having a good time, and B, that you're on the edge of your seat. Let's keep it that way. All right, so that's number one. Number two is about, of course, last night's game. Well, last night's game was, I'm just gonna sum it up by saying, like, man, when the tank does his job, everything seems to work out, all right? So last night, Ratheon was the superstar, without question. Curtis playing Ratheon was the star of the show, I feel, because like all he did was brilliant move, brilliant play. He cast Sanctuary on himself as a paladin and then held the line. Like a good Spartan or a good Roman legionnaire or any good soldier would do. He held the line, and it was awesome. It was so cool. We ended up fighting like 13 orcs, like wave after wave of orcs. One Crit Wonder just kept throwing these things at us because basically there was a farmhouse full of them, and we just plowed in through the front door, also through windows, but that's another story. So we had this amazing experience where Ratheon and Longtooth, before we even started, before any of the combat occurred, Ratheon and Longtooth had a conversation quietly outside the front door, and basically Ratheon said, I'm just gonna we can make a bottleneck at the front door. I'll get in the front door and hold them back, and you just, because Longtooth uses a pike, essentially, which is, he calls it a boar spear or a long spear, right, is how you can think of it. So he's gonna use his pike, his long spear, and attack, essentially, over the shoulder or past Ratheon, who's gonna be in the door holding these enemies back. And it worked! In fact, it worked perfectly for the most part because, of course, you know, Alun, my character, and of course, Zook and all the rest of us, we had to, well, you know, Jamril and I both got injured because we poked our heads in, you know, quote unquote. We got inside when we probably should have not. And then, of course, on top of that, okay, so like, Ratheon definitely was the man. He just like held the orcs back. They could barely scratch him. I think he took in like out of 5 or 6 rounds or more probably of combat, and countless attacks, he probably got hit twice, maybe twice, maybe 3 times at the very, very most. And I don't even think it was that much because they had to make a saving throw. Then on top of him having Sanctuary, which made them make a saving throw, most of the rounds, pretty much the whole fight, he was taking the dodge action, which meant they had disadvantage on their attacks. So like the whole fight, they could barely, and he's like, you know, a tin can, so they could barely touch him. Well, he's not really a tin can. I say that jokingly, of course. But the point being is a very high armor class, and they have disadvantage, and they have to make a saving throw just to attack him in the first place. So just brilliant play, really cool, and perfectly executed, which was awesome. And then on top of that, we had Cazador, who sort of kind of hesitated, waited for things to get underway, and then came in on her own from the back door, as she'd want to do. She's sort of this like stealthy, sneaky monk, which I absolutely love, and she snuck in the back, and so we don't even know what's happening essentially, because none of the rest of us characters can see what's going on. We probably just hear a bunch of fighting and so forth, and Cazador sort of grunts and screams and, you know, her battle cries or whatever. So essentially what happens thematically, or like if you imagine like the movie version of it, is like there's this fight breaks out, everybody's doing their thing, and then once the fight's over, we sort of just like, you know, I had a loom say at 1 or 2 points, we're like, where's Cazador? And then we find out after like combat has ceased, there's like, she's in the other room rifling through pockets and searching the bodies, and there's just like a pile of bodies around her. She like single-handedly took out like 4 or 5 of them on her own. I think it was 5 of the orcs that she took out on her own, basically. And then between Longtooth and myself and Jamril and Zook, we ended up defeating the others. And Ratheon did not take a single attack the entire fight. Again, brilliant, because if he had, he would have lost Sanctuary, it would have totally ruined the plan and screwed everything up. And so, yeah, sometimes your plans don't go the way you want and everything screws up and you just have to be like, you have to just roll with it. And other times, the plans work great. Now, of course, I'm talking about the plans of the players, but on the other hand, the plans of the DM is pretty much always going to get messed up no matter what. Like, I didn't plan on creating that much tension for the group in the game I was running in We Out Here. I certainly did not intend to create that kind of tension, and yet because of the way things laid out, I guess that's what ended up happening. So yeah, so just keep that quote in mind and realize that that's probably what's going to happen in every game, at least in my experience, in every game of D&D. Things will go awry. So enjoy it, roll with it, have fun with it, of course, roll with it. There you go. Let's leave on that silly pun, which was totally unintentional. I'll see you tomorrow, and remember, it's your game. Play your way.